Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing what every other booktuber has been doing out there at the moment, which is to go through the mid-year book freakout tag of 2021. So last year I started my channel, I think a little bit after this tag was out, and I kind of really was gutted because I wanted to participate in it so badly. So this year I'm not missing out, I'm definitely going to participate, and I have the tag questions with me on my phone so I can go through them now. The first question of the tag is best book you have read so far in 2021. So to answer this question, let me just quickly go through my Google Sheet where I have copied the Copile system invented by G from Book Roast, and this system kind of allows you to figure out the actual rating that you have for a book based on how much you like the characters, the atmosphere, etc. And once you've input all of that information, it gives you a rounded up number out of 5 so that you can actually rate it accordingly on your Goodreads. So since I have been doing that, I have all of my 5 stars in front of me and I can actually check which one I think was my favorite one of the year so far. Okay, so just checking my rating, I have actually 7 5 stars in total out of the books that I've been reading. It's not that many, I think I've read in total 30 books, but out of those there's a couple that I have DNF'd, so they're not all books that I have finished and input into my Goodreads. But out of those 5 stars that I've got, we have things like Anxious People, Cemetery Boys, Legendborn, quite a few YA actually, and I think just in general I wanted to look at my strongest 5 star, and the one that has the strongest number does feel to me like it was one of my favorite books that I have read so far this year. So this is the book, it's The Decagon House Murders by Yukito Ayatsuji, and this is basically a classic mystery translated from Japanese. It's only been translated recently, so this is by Pushkin Vertigo. They've been translating I think a few of these types of books that are classic Asian mysteries, but it's actually quite old originally. I think it was written in 1987, so it is actually an older book, but it's just only recently been translated into English, I think. So this was definitely a great thriller slash mystery to read. Very, very interesting, very different from the style I usually read, and I just enjoyed myself so much. I read it at the same time as my brother. We both like these types of books, and it was just really fun as well to have someone reading it at the same time, and just made it even a better experience. Basically, this follows a bunch of kids who are obsessed with murder mysteries, and in particular true crime, and there is actually a crime that has happened on an island in a very specific style of house that was built as a decagon because the guy who built it was said to be kind of an eccentric architect. And because all of those kids are in college and they're in this club where they write about crime, they decide to do a club outing activity thing where they go on the island and sleep in the house for a whole week, just as kind of like an experience together and to write about it in their little journal club activity thing. But obviously things go wrong and they receive a threat that kind of says that they're all gonna die one by one, and they do indeed start dying one by one. It is pretty much inspired by Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, which is mentioned in the book and kind of used as a reference as well, and is said to be a book that was officially inspired by this story as well. I really enjoyed discovering the characters' personalities and wondering throughout the entire book, I really was wondering the entire time who was the killer and what their motivation was, and it was just really interesting to try and solve it. So the second question is best sequel you've read so far in 2021. That's a tough one because I don't think I have read that many sequels, but let me have a look. So this is kind of a really tough question because I've only read 2 books so far this year that were actually sequels to another book. I do actually have a video going on right now that I'm currently reading for that is reading a bunch of sequels, so I'm sure I'm gonna have way more in the second half of the year, but in this first half I only have 2, and out of the 2 I think this one was the best one. It was really enjoyable and I literally just finished it like 10 minutes before filming this video. It's called The Deck of Omens by Kristen Lynn Herman, and it's the sequel to The Devouring Grey. It is YA fantasy, but kind of contemporary fantasy, so it is set in our world and our day and age, but with magical powers and supernatural stuff happening at the same time. I haven't rated it yet, so I can't tell you exactly my actual thoughts about this book, but I did feel like although it had a lot of flows that I was very aware of for some reason, I still enjoyed myself deeply and kept wanting to pick it up, so I didn't think it was a really fun read for me, so it is gonna count as my favorite sequel so far in the year. Next question is new release you haven't read yet but want to. So there's quite a few, but I'm gonna pick just one from the books that I actually have bought already and do intend to read and are very new, but that I just haven't gotten to yet. Okay, so this is one that I'm strangely excited for, even though I hadn't really heard anything about it before buying it, and then I saw a lot of people commenting that it was very similar to Daisy Jones and the Six, which I adored and rated 5 stars, and I was like, I really want to read this. So this is called The Final Revival of Opal and Nev by Donnie Walton, and I can't remember exactly when it came out, but it did come out this year, so it's a fairly new release. This is basically like Daisy Jones and the Six, if you have read it. If you haven't, basically it's in the format of interviews for a book, I think, or a biography or something, talking about this band, and the band in question is from the early 70s in New York City and is following two main people here, which are Opal and Nev. It does also have something to do with race issues, because there's something about a Confederate flag that was brandished at a promotional concert, so I think it's going to touch on some deeper issues, I guess, than Daisy Jones and the Six, although you could say that it did touch on deep issues because it talks a lot about drugs and drug use and going to rehab and stuff like that, but I just feel like this is kind of on a different theme and just going to be as interesting, I think. The next question in this list is the most anticipated release for the second half of the year. So books that are not out yet but are coming out after this video, basically, and that I'm excited for. So there's actually quite a few that I have in my Amazon wishlist at the moment that are going to come out in the second half of the year. Certain Dark Things by Sylvia Moreno Garcia, and she wrote a couple of books that I've really enjoyed, including a Mexican Gothic. I think I read that last year around Halloween, and it was so good, and she is getting this book out that sounds a lot more like urban fantasy. I think it's got to do with vampires and vampire hunters and stuff, and first of all, that's a genre that I really love, even though it's not really out anymore these days. It's more like you get to read all the books that are in that genre. There's not that many new ones coming out in that genre, and she is a writer that I have adored every book I've read by her so far. So this combination sounds absolutely perfect, and this book comes out in September, so I'm really hopeful it's going to be great. Also, the cover art looks stunning and exactly up my alley. The biggest disappointment so far of the year. So my biggest disappointment of the year so far has to be this book, The Sanatorium by Sarah Pearse. I don't know why I had such high hopes for this book. I think there's something about the cover that just made me think it was going to be a really fun thriller and I was going to enjoy myself for some reason. There's something about this color and this cover, but also the premise. The premise sounded really fun. So this is a thriller, it's an adult novel, and it is set with I think it's a UK cop, but it doesn't happen in the UK. I think it's somewhere in the Swiss Alps, maybe, I think so. And basically the main character, Ellen, is invited by her kind of estranged brother to go celebrate his recent engagement to his fiancée in this brand new hotel that's just been transformed into a hotel but used to be an asylum, and it's called, well, it used to be a sanatorium basically. It's called the Sanatorium, and it is up there in the Alps, I think, and it's, you know, very isolated in the middle of the snow and all that, but she decides to agree and go there because she's kind of also on a break from work. She's not really working, she's a detective, but she's had a very tough case recently that's reminded her of some past trauma, which I think we can say is the fact that her younger brother died when she was a kid, and so she's not really up to work at the moment, so she decides to go with her partner. And then the fiancé in question disappears, and there we go. But I was both disappointed by the ending that was very villain monologue-like, and also by the main character in general. I just didn't really want to root for her. She wasn't very interesting. She didn't feel to me like a cop, like a lot of the ways that she was actually investigating. Felt like anyone could do the same thing, I could do the same thing, and maybe that is the actual way that people do detective work, but I just wanted to dream a little bit more and to kind of feel like it was done in a way that was different and just made me think more of her as a professional. There's also the fact that she was very whiny, and it was really hard to root for her. Ultimately, this was a huge disappointment for me, so I rated it 2.5 stars. I think I rounded it up to 3, but really it's more of a 2 stars for me. So the next question is, what was your biggest surprise of the year? I'm gonna go with Ring Shout by P. Djeli Clark, and it's not so much a surprise in the sense that I didn't think I would enjoy it and I did enjoy it. It's more a surprise in the sense that the way it's been advertised made me think it was gonna be way more like dark and grim and literature-like, if that makes sense. I thought it was gonna be very literary in style, but it was actually way more action-packed and made me think of Buffy universe type of thing. Basically, we are following the adventure of Maryse Boudreau, and she lives at the time of the second wave of the clan, and during that time it's an alternate version of our universe where the KKK is actually using real monsters that come from hell that are disguised as members, and so she fights them with kind of a ghost sword, and it's just really cool, and she's with a band of people who are all helping in different ways. It's very Buffy style, I thought, and I loved that. It was just so much fun, so it was a huge surprise because I didn't expect it to go that way at all. I think it's advertised as being a horror/thriller type of book, and it didn't make me think it was very much horror. It made me think more it was supernatural or urban fantasy style. The next question is a favorite new author, so a debut or new to me author. That one is an easy one. I'm gonna go with Frederick Backman. I read Anxious People this year. I've literally just posted the video where I talk about this book, which is the video where I read 3 contemporary novels, and I loved this book so much. It surprised me so much as well. I didn't realize I would enjoy it this much, and immediately after I was like, I need to buy more books by him because this was a lot of fun, and I really enjoy his writing style, and I think anything he's gonna write I may want to read at some point. So I did actually buy Beartown, which I do intend to read this year as well, by the same author, so I do intend to follow through with that decision. Then the next question was newest fictional crush. I don't actually think I have any fictional crush from all the books that I've been reading this year. This is kind of a tough question for me because I didn't really read anything that would give me any fictional crush. I don't think any of the books would qualify as having potential crushes for me. Maybe the YA novels I read, but they're young adult characters, so it feels extremely weird to talk about them that way when I'm a full-grown adult. So I think I'm gonna go with a bit of a twist on my answer, which is I read this year All Systems Red by Martha Wells, which is the Murderbot Diaries' first novella, and I gotta say, I think I pretty much fell in love with the AI in this. Just the characteristic and like the personality of this AI were just so perfect and great and hilarious that I just fell in love with that personality. I don't really know how else to explain this, but to tell you a little bit about this book, it is a sci-fi novella, and we are following this security unit. So it's an AI that has been created to help with security. And it is working as part of this team of scientists that are exploring this new planet or system or whatever. And basically it has a lot of self-awareness. It's overridden a lot of its protocols to kind of do whatever the fuck it wants. Mainly, it just wants to be left alone, not talk to people, and watch TV shows all day long, which yes, absolutely, that's a mood. And it calls itself Murderbot because of some past incident. So yeah, I just really enjoyed this character, and after I finished it, I immediately wanted to buy the rest of the series just to read more from this character's point of view. So I feel like that counts as a crush. The next question is newest favorite character. I feel like that was kind of my answer, but I'm not sure that I can do that. So I think instead I'm gonna go with Bree from Legendborn just because she was so fun to read from. This is a brick. This is a YA fantasy novel. It's contemporary fantasy, so again, set up in our world and our day and age, but with supernatural elements that are all linked to Arthurian legend. And this was such a ride. I enjoyed this book so much. I rated it 5 stars as well. It's one of my 5 stars of the first half of the year. And the main character's evolution and everything about her was just great. I loved her. I thought she was such a badass and really cool. So I'm gonna go with Bree from Legendborn as my newest favorite character. Okay, so there's 4 questions left. The next one is a book that made you cry. and I don't think I really have one. I may just answer Anxious People because it made me tear up at certain passages and laugh out loud at others. So it's probably the book that made me feel the most intense things I want to say this year. So I'm gonna go with that. Next, a book that made you happy. There's plenty of those. I could easily just say Anxious People once again, but let's just find another one. I'm gonna actually go with The Haunted Murders just because it's one of the first books that I read this year and it just made me so happy. Not in terms of the story, which is, it's a murder mystery. It's another one of those translated from Japanese, much older novel, this one, but it made me happy in the sense that it was so fun to read, super fast-paced, it's very short and just so different and interesting that it really made me want to read more after reading this book. So it did the exact opposite of a reading slump when I read it at the beginning of the year. So I'm gonna go with this one. The next question is the most beautiful book that you've bought or received this year. I have a lot and I have received a lot, mostly because I buy a lot of books based on covers and I love owning hardback cover books that are just super beautiful. It's kind of my thing, so it's really hard to choose just one, but I'm gonna go with one of the latest ones that I have bought. This is Hummingbird Salamander by Jeff Vandermeer, and this is the first side. Just first of all, the gold on it is, I love everything that shines. Like, honestly, this is beautiful. And you have the hummingbird on this side, and then when you flip it, you have the salamander. I just think this book is stunning. It's just one of many, so this is the one I've decided to pick for this. Finally, the last question is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? I don't think I have any books that I need to read by the end of the year, but I have a lot that I have on my TBR and a lot that I'm trying to play into themed videos as well, so that I kind of need to finish them in order to finish those videos. So I'm just gonna go through a little bit of my list of books that I still need to read in order to finish these videos. So I'm doing a video where I'm gonna read 3 sci-fi adult novels, and in there I am already reading To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Paolini, which is this huge break, but I am not very far in it. I am enjoying it and I do plan on finishing it this year, even though it's massive. I also really want to get to Malibu Rising this month, so I'm actually hoping that this is going to happen, even though it is on my TBR, so it should happen. But even if I don't read anything else this month, this is the one that I do want to read. Then, as I just finished The Deck of Romance, this one was for a sequel series, and I have a lot more books in that series to read. So the next ones on there are going to be Foxes and Good Girl, Bad Blood. I also really want to get to this book called Random Shit Flying Through the Air, and it's also a sequel. It is by Jackson Ford, and this is about a girl who has telepathic powers and is kind of being used by a cover agency thing that kind of does missions, I guess. I also really want to read To Be Told If Fortunate, because I'm doing a little bit on novellas as well right now, and I have Empress of Salt and Fortune in that list as well, and Every Heart a Doorway, which is actually on this month's TBR. So there's a lot of different books that I need to read soon, but I don't have any specific books that I'm like, I have to finish it by the end of the year. So I think that's it. That was the last question in this little series of questions for this book tag. I'm really excited for all the books that I'm going to be reading soon. I just feel like it was interesting to go through this list and realize that I don't actually have one answer for everything, and very often it's hard to choose just one book. But yeah, that was it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like and or a comment down below. I always try to respond. Consider subscribing, ringing that bell, all that jazz, and I will see you guys in the next one.